Good morning. I'm going to do my absolute best to try and record these videos for you today, but if you've looked out the window you'll see it's very snowy and it is affecting my internet connection, so apologies in advance if any of this is a little slow or fuzzy. So let's get on with our maths. We've been looking over the past week at different shapes and their properties, and today we're going to concentrate on how we can draw those shapes using square grids and dotty grids, and you should have a sheet of both sent home to you. So just think for a moment, which shapes do you suppose are best drawn on a square grid? Okay, I think a square grid is ideal for drawing shapes that have square straight sides. And obviously a big clue as to one of the shapes we can draw is in the name. We can draw a square. So if I draw a square, I've got to measure really carefully, haven't I? Because I know all the sides on a square are exactly the same. So I'm actually counting the squares as I go here. 1, 2, 3, which means I have to go down 1, 2, 3. Do that now. And across 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is a 3 by 3 square. I could of course do a tiny square. What other shapes could I do? Well, if I can do a square, I'm sure I can do a rectangle. And if you remember, a rectangle differs from a square in that two of the sides, although the same length, are longer or shorter than the other two sides. So here I have drawn a rectangle. I've made these two sides 2 squares, and I've made the longer sides 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares, and 5 squares across there, and that has allowed me to make a rectangle. I could do a very long thin rectangle. Okay, remember, whatever I do to one side I have to do exactly the same with a straight line to the other. Now obviously it's hard for me to draw freehand on the computer, but I do have the benefit of a tool that draws straight lines. You guys have to use a ruler. So that's a square grid. What about dotty grids? Well, a dotty grid is ideal for drawing shapes such as a triangle, where you might have a line that comes down on what we call a diagonal. Okay, I'll show you what I mean by that. So if I use a spot to start on, I can cut across these 2 spots here, or dots I should say, across those 2 dots there, and join across here, and I have made a triangle. That's actually an isosceles triangle. You can make all different types of triangles, but the dots do help you, especially when it comes to copying shapes, put them into the right place. So we can definitely do a range of triangles on a dotty grid, and that's what the skill we're going to be looking at today. So start nice and simple. Elliot has drawn a square and she wants to copy it. Now before we copy it, think really carefully, what might I need to do to create a square that looks exactly the same as Elliot's? So firstly, I need to count the squares to see how big she has made her square. Okay, so here's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She's made the horizontal line 5 squares long. So this also should be 5 squares, because I know a square has sides that are all the same. Let's count and say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you guys with a ruler, sorry I can't demonstrate on here actually using a ruler to draw these lines, would draw a line 5 long and then go down vertically 5, 5 across and up to join it for 5. So let's have a little practice at that and see what it would look like. So I'd start here, I'd count, you'd line a ruler up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'd take my ruler and I would come down 5 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Across now, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, apologies, that line is not quite, there we go, as flush as I would like it to be. And then finally, I can join those two up. And although I've done it in a slightly different position on the grid, can you see I've made exactly the same shape? Ruby has used the dotty paper to draw a triangle, and then he wants to copy it. Let's have a think about how we can do that. Now, a triangle is more difficult to do, okay? But again, it all comes down to counting. One line is much easier to do than the other, so I'm going to start with that one. The easier line is this one, because it's just a straight horizontal line, straight across. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So to copy that, helps if I have my ruler tool the right way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Take a moment to check, count again if you need to. Now this is where it gets a little bit trickier, because I need to work out on the grid where this point is here, this vertex right here. So it looks to me as though it's in the middle of this length here. So let's count how many squares in that would be. 0, 1, 2, 3. So if I count in 3 and then I draw down 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to repeat this now on mine. 0, 1, 2, 3. Look up. Is it exactly in the middle as that one is? Yes, it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So all the while I'm drawing a comparison between this shape and this shape. Match those lines up. Again, you guys would use a ruler, but the skill is the same. You place your pencil right on that dot. You line your ruler up against the point that you've just drawn, and then match them up. Do the same on this one. You would line your ruler up here between this point and this point. You can of course turn your page around if that is easier. I don't have the advantage of doing that here, but you could simply rotate, rotate the page around if that makes it easy for you to draw it. This should be easy because I can just match those two up. Okay, are we satisfied they're exactly the same? Yes, I'm happy with that. Okay, so for your guided practice today, you are going to copy the figures onto square grid paper. So here's a square, that's nice and straightforward. Now they've actually used the square paper to draw a triangle here, but it's the same skill. Use the counting to see where you would need to do it. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I can see 4 lines along there, but the third vertex here is actually 1 in, isn't it? So if I count 0, 1, 2, 3, and then up 1, 2, 3, 4, that's where I would make my dot and join those lines up. Again, this is just we're not fooled anymore. We know that this shape is a rectangle. Okay. And again, you'll need to do some careful counting. These are diagonally across those two squares. So that could help you to line those up. because they're exactly on a diagonal, and these ones are exactly on a diagonal, so you could count how long across the squares they are to reproduce that. The figures below are on the dotty paper, okay, and you can notice that some of these shapes have diagonals again, and see how the dotty paper helps you to recreate those. Again, just a matter of doing some counting, okay, using your ruler and using those diagonal lines where you go from one corner, one vertex, to the opposite vertex. Okay, and then just as a little challenge for you here, does each shape have a line of symmetry? Okay, so you do have some mirrors at home. Some of you might just see them and not need to check with the mirror. Okay, but it's a good way of lining a mirror up at different points to see if that shape is or isn't symmetrical. Okay, perhaps if they're a symmetrical shape, you could put a little S underneath the ones that you think are symmetrical before taking a photo and popping it into your portfolio. Once you've completed that, you can see it's a very similar activity in your worksheets today. Just using the squares and the dots to copy shapes. Count carefully, use a ruler, and good luck. So just a reminder that your corresponding workbook pages are pages 53 to 54. Again, once you've completed those, pop them in your portfolio for us to take a look over today. Enjoy!